change. The Astrotherapy Podcast interviews.
I definitely, as I was walking up my stairs en route to this podcast, I was like, oh, maybe we should go for the artery of what's happening right now, and just like,
Sure.
um,
Let's hit it. What are you in the mood for?
I'm in the mood for love. Welcome to the Astrotherapy Podcast. I'm Ciela Wynter, and it is such an auspicious moment. Astrologically speaking, it's incredibly potent today, and so it's no surprise to me that I'm sitting here with Ali Bogard. And I just wanted to share that my heart knows this woman for eternity. And that's all. Thank you for coming, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for our talk.
My heart, Ali, my heart knows you. My heart knows this woman. And yet we met in this physical embodiment at a mutual friend's wedding. And this is not just any mutual friend. We have been wing women. We have lifted him up and supported him through life's adventures, hearing about one another and doing this tag team work in such a powerful, beautiful way. And now we get to lift each other up. And yeah, I'm really excited and honored to share Ali with all of you. And some of you may know her. She's a teacher. She's a mentor. She's a guide. She practices embodiment and works with leaders in all capacities. And really from a particular lens of, we could say spiritual, but I just want to say present. And yeah, I'm really glad that you're here, Ali.
Oh, I'm so glad to be with you. You're one of the people that's so edgeless for me to love and hang out with. It's never got an edge. Doesn't have a rub, doesn't have an end, doesn't have a beginning, and I'm so happy to be in any conversation that you're in.
Thank you, Ali. You know, I have enough edge inside of me that I'm pressing up against all the time. So thank you for being such an incredible mirror and friend that I can bring my edge to, and you can just help me, kind of glide through some of the sticky places. Yeah, I'm in this moment, I'm feeling a very intense kind of edge personally. And I don't think I'm alone in this. I feel like many of us are feeling an edge. It's curious that you brought that up, because I've been exploring this, in my own growth, where, I tend to press up against an edge, and sometimes even going to it with such a fierce level of curiosity that it could even be to my own detriment at times, of like how close to the edge I want to go. And I'm curious if you have any thoughts about that.
Yeah, I have so many thoughts about it, in that I think it is mandatory, necessary way of getting to live one's own life. Like, how do we know an edge unless we walk towards it? And that might be the edge of our capability in opening up to another person. It might be the edge of skill level inside of a profession that's like right outside of what we feel confident in risk and in like previous experience. And so I think those that are on like a desire to live a life that feels really authentic and essential, dancing on the edge, pushing the edge, tipping off the edge is like the conversation. And I think there's a lot of our systems that need to learn what it feels like to live way back from an edge, and to not have to peek over it, not have to push it. I think you and I have had really similar paths, in that regardless if it was sports or travel or men or spirituality or plant medicine, they had a similar quality of extremity to them. in the way that our paths seem to have like, similar trajectories, that they had extreme ways, extreme personalities, extreme feelings, extreme depths, extreme psychoses. you know? And I think training the mundanality and the back from the edge and the feet on solid ground and nothing to peek over is also an incredible place of interest and intrigue for me.
Absolutely. I mean, you're painting this picture of, the extremes of pressing into the edge, pulling back from the edge. There's something about that push-pull has been very resonant through my recent days. And, we're talking about change in this particular series that I'm working with, Ali. This is a container where we're exploring change, and what you're describing is, okay, this might be our tendency, this might be, how we've always approached life in a particular way, but then what if we attempt this? What if we try this? What if we explore this? And inside of that, there is an exploration of change. There's our relationship to it. There is the moving through it. There is becoming it. Um, is that pulling back from the edge something that you're currently exploring?
In some capacities, I think it would really relate to change in the place of change is always occurring. We know that is happening, like in the body, in the psyche, in the world, in our relationships. And there can be places in my life where I can see my desire to keep everything in a state of change doesn't always let things root, settle, and just let lie. And so it's a conversation I'm having just in the greater space of like the edge and change of balance, for lack of any other word, of and when I'm not on the growing edge and when I'm not in a state of change and changing a dynamic and a pattern and a life, what does it feel like to be in just an okay settled here now? So I think that's the bigger conversation because I love and live for the edge and change, but sometimes I have to evaluate why and what's compelling it and what am I trying to get away from and what am I so convinced needs to change? Because if I'm not conscious of it, what am I so subconsciously obsessed with fixing or getting away from? And so I guess it's a conversation in me of looking at the subconscious motivators and drivers behind some things that I used to call growth. Um, and I guess I always tend to look at things and just how does it relate to nature? We know things that grow at the cost of their host. We know that as a species on our planet, or cancer in the body, or yeast in the body. We know things that grow at the cost of what can hold it. And I sometimes consider that for spiritual development in my psyche when I put big development over top of my limited nervous system. What growth and change and edge can my system hold and stabilize and secure? So I guess the conversation that I've been in my own life is with the edge, with extreme, with growth. What's it motivating and what am I trying to get? Because I think when the edge happens or change happens as an act of just like, because it occurred and I have to meet it, I trust that a little bit more than when I went and did it or forced it, for lack of a better word. I don't know how that relates in your world.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I, as you know, I was recently on a vision quest,
Long one.
and a long one. And one of the first things that happened for me there was this annihilation of the needing to know, of the impulse to control or to know or to organize. Um, and inside of that, I could see myself. Um, there was no good reason why I needed to know, what was going to be happening that afternoon or the next day, or even how I should really prepare in certain ways. It was more out of just this habitual kind of um, addiction of being in a state of wanting to have a semblance of, direction in what was going to occur, so I could already be there. But in that already being there, I wasn't here. I wasn't being present at all. And, there's something about that slowing down and consideration of why am I doing this? Why am I seeking that? Why am I pushing here as opposed to just being where I am? And I'm curious for you and for me, when I really consider why it's hard for me to be where I am, it's because then I'm feeling everything. I feel everything at once, and it can be overwhelming. It can be a tremendous um, responsibility to be here, and also as to have a real empathic kind of visceral way of moving through the world. To be here, to be present, can feel like a lot. So I also am just working on having compassion for myself around why I might not necessarily want to always be here, and my tendencies to want to be either organizing for the future or reflecting on the past. But there's something so profound, so rich, so deep, so real, so raw about being here that can't be found in any other direction or space.
When it was annihilated, subtly or greatly, what filled the space that was otherwise occupied with preparation?
Space.
Just space on space.
It was this almost like this feeling of having my breath taken away, of just having to be in this incredible pause, but the pause was alive, and inside of that, uh, I could have some objectivity and begin to witness an incredible amount of resistance and fears and justifications and kind of whining, all kinds of things of not wanting this process to happen as I started to just completely allow it to. So there was allowance in the midst of all the resistance and pushback, but that just started to kind of slough off into this really futile tumbling of, witnessing myself and laughing about it in the moments of pain and agony that I was also experiencing from that center of gravity of myself that was still kind of holding on to it. But you know, in the process and after releasing that, it's just like, wow, I definitely didn't need that. That was taking up so much of my time, my space, my energy, my being. And for what cause, for what result was I actually attaining with any of that? Because none of it was real. None of it was real. Like, I no longer need to know.
What's going to happen?
Yeah, because I know I can't.
Yeah.
I know that I don't have that capacity. I can see things in different layers of now, but I'm not a fortune teller. I don't know if in this time any of us, even with psychic capacity, can truly know or understand what's coming down the pipeline.
No,
So
I completely agree. I think every choice point sets a new potentiality in motion. And I think what occurs to me is that we have this bottom up versus top down approach to meeting the self. And I'd say the bottom up approach is acknowledging at a level of parts and psyche, there are so many different parts of us that, evolutionarily speaking and biologically speaking and relationally speaking, they do need to know what's going to happen. Is dad going to come home tonight? Do I have somewhere to sleep tonight? Is there a meal tomorrow? And those ways of starting to take care of those parts of us that have been built in needing to know what's going to happen for their survival can happen through, building some trust that whatsoever occurs, I'll figure it out. They can learn how to build some trust in life by looking at the past, like, okay, I've always been met before and I've always been able to get the help I needed when I needed it. And then there's the beautiful kind of slow, gradual approach of acknowledging those parts exist, but they're not really able to do what they think they're able to do. And so we nurture them and tend to them and provide for them in order to build some kind of regulated trust. And then the top-down approach, which is more of the annihilation approach, is doing exactly what you did there, or in maybe these extreme edge practices you and I have engaged in, which is we take those parts and we say they're not as important to tend to as the truth is. And sometimes those are car crashes in our system,
What do we
right?
do, Allie?
Pontificate. I think both. I think we have to do both. The more I've realized so much of my early spiritual development was top down and I left the bottom out. I didn't take care of where I would dissociate in that place where it's just like, no, it's scary to be here. I do need to know, is that door closed for the day? And I do
Yes.
need to know, is there rent here for this month? And so I think a lot of my early extreme work of bottom down, vision quest, plant medicine, annihilate it, face the truth, tell the truth, fact and reality, it has no purpose, it has no point, is so it and beautiful and real and true. And I think the beautiful and in the conversation is, and we are this evolutionary biological system of parts that
Yes.
also need to be tended to say, I do need to know what's going to happen in our relationship in a month. Are we going in the same direction? Do we have a contract that we want to commit to a bit of a future? And I know that's not totally true, but for some parts of me it is.
Yes.
So I
Yes,
guess
it
the
was an
conversation,
agreement. It's
yeah,
like it's like creating the agreement and the container from which we can explore the boundarylessness, right? I
yeah,
mean, it's that we need we need heaven, we need earth, we need a bridge in between the two in
that.
relationship dynamic. Yeah.
So did you know how many days you were going to be on Vision Quest before you went?
Before I went, I was planning to go for 31 days.
Okay.
And I got there and change was everywhere. So I had prepared myself for a certain amount of time, and then elements outside of my control, as far as like the land that I was going to be on, and certain politics and dynamics that were happening between, those that were holding the space for the Vision Quest and the owners of the land, so completely out of my control. And I just, that was one example where it was just this huge let go. I'm here, and whatever it's going to be is what it's going to be. And ultimately, I can wholeheartedly say I ended up being there for 17 days. 17 days was exactly the amount of time that that I could even physically sustain, that I required for the particular body of inner work that I was there to explore and to do, and for the emotional rebirthing process that held me and was the beginning of something.
I
You
bet.
know, it's not that container was the beginning of something. So I started something there, or I continued something there. It's still continuing. There's no beginning or end. So here's that juxtaposition of 17 days. There was a beginning, a middle, and end. I lived every single second of those 17 days in a way that I have never lived a second in my life. And at the same time, it was a continuation and continues to be. So,
Yeah, I think that adds a lot of amazing context for anybody even relating to this conversation, is that having a container, a bridge, a something that has a beginning, middle, and end is a really important way of starting to explore some of these conversations in terms of you had 17 days. If you had an unlimited amount of time, the mind would go into automatic places of what's going to happen next. What am I going to eat again?
Mhm.
And so if somebody is in a thing of saying, okay, I do want to start to build the muscle of trust in life and trust in my nervous system. So for just today or just an hour, I'm going to watch my tendency to not pre-live life and constantly stay prepared. And I think that's a really amazing way of meeting the body and its needs, the parts and their needs, and then the truth and its requirement is to say, okay, there's going to be a finite period of time where I put myself in a container. And that could happen in a relationship. Somebody could say, just for this 1 month, we're not going to ask each other, what are we going to become? For this 1 week in my career, I'm going to just like work in a way of doing what I know to do without wondering what the outcome of it is. And so I think there's some real world tangible ways of creating finite time-based containers to like meet us in this conversation. And I think that too, if somebody's really deep in their work of self, just becoming, where it's like, okay, I'm going to take this summer and not therapize anything and watch if there's this subtle obsession with something needs to change, something
Uh-huh.
about me needs to shift. And so there's kind of these really beautiful time-based pauses or experiments that we can see what's motivating what. Because you have a mastery and seniority in how much you've put yourself in spaces where you can really trust yourself. And I think like there's some steps to moving towards your degree of practice that finite periods of time I can see really can help.
Well, as you're saying that, I'm curious, Ali, like um how you're addressing the leaders that you're working with right now, and what is the conversation there in this moment of so much change. And like you said, changes everywhere, changes all the time. But there's something very potent about now and how much change there is, how much each one of us as individuals are being confronted. And I think each one of us is having to kind of explore how to move through our mundane responsibilities and logistics while holding this ever growing potentiality of existential threat on the planet. And what's the conversation you're having with leaders in this time?
So I think it's mostly twofold. Is one, I think both in the world at large, but let's just be like so relevant and real to just who we are as people. What I'm seeing is there's a lot of people that feel like some systems inside of them need to change because they built some systems in their life, whether it's systems of how they spend money, how they spend time, the way their relationships work, how people come to them for help, what they give. Like these are systems. Some of them are explicit, some of them are just like adopted through habit. And the need for systems to change in order to support some new parts of them that are coming online. The biggest conversation I seem to be having is there's some things that just no longer feel relevant. Like I wanted some things before, I don't want them anymore. Some relationships used to fill me up, I can't find them anymore. Like I can't like find that same eye to eye feeling of the people in my life. And so the change is almost this disorienting thing of watching earlier selves put lives into motion. They put relationships and jobs and patterns into motion. And when those integrate or they no longer become relevant, it often becomes necessary to look at what systems were supporting those old parts and how do I need to update my systems? The systems of how I take time for myself, the systems of how I'm regrouping or in nature or saving money or spending time, And so that's a big conversation of noticing I don't want what I used to. Things that used to be relevant are no longer. And I have to change the systems that support my life financially, energetically, relationally, spiritually, so that the part of me that's coming online has some new systems to operate inside of. And I think that's kind of systemic of the bigger world of like we're in big systems change. They don't work. They don't work. They're either too big or they're too top heavy or they don't support life. We have so many systems that don't support life.
Hmm.
And then we're so surprised at the chaos of it all. And so I think that would be what I'd reduce it down to. What systems in your life are supporting your life in the way you want it to move? And that has me looking at what I'm spending time and energy on. And then I think the other big conversation of systems change and something inside of me doesn't feel relevant is where can I start to create new processes, really effective, efficient processes of delineating what's mine, what's not. So I can sit and I can become overrun by so many global things. And then when I sit and say, I'm not touched by it right now, and I can't affect it right now. So can I spend time, energy, and resources on what I can affect and what I can touch? And it's finding that balance point between being informed and being empathic and not being hidden in the ways that perhaps just circumstance and privilege doesn't let life touch us, but also doing that in a way that lets me like take my energy, my resources, and my impact and move it in something I can. So getting really distilled and clear on, is it mine and is it now? Can I affect it? Is that my job? Is it my business? Is it impacting the sphere of influence that I can? Because I see a lot of people getting so overwhelmed with everything they can't touch that it creates an apathy or paralysis in what they can. And that's just good old fashioned nervous system regulation. It's just too much, you know?
So how are you regulating your nervous system?
Well, I have a pretty regulated one that I can speak of not having children. You know, like I have a lot of people I support, but a lot of my time is my own. And I say that with a great deal of compassion and empathy for the friends in my life that are running worlds where they don't have such a clear delineation of that's mine, that's not. You know, I've got a
Hmm.
friend whose teenage kid is in such extreme states of pain all the time that she doesn't get to have that clear line of this is mine, this isn't. Girlfriend
Hmm.
raising a toddler and not a clear line. And so I say that first and foremost, if I do take the chance to say that. So anything I say next, if somebody is running a big household, they can just throw away because it is also like a regulated nervous system is also a gift of time. It's a gift of
Hmm.
resources. It's a gift of tools and know-how. But I love a morning to be my own. That's one of the biggest things for me is like starting in my own pace and my own practices, not turning on the news right away, not being inundated by clients' stories right away, so that I can craft a little bit of time of tending to myself and my system because I have one of those systems that immediately goes and tends to others before self. So I've had to do a lot of my rerouting to just stay with myself and stay in what's mine and then give when I have it to give. I notice a pattern that's really obvious in my face is also on the other side of not having a family. There is a space that people immediately take in saying like, well, then I can help them solve these problems and I can help them in their relationship issues and I can help them in that place. So there's also like a pretty hard line that I have to draw for myself of just because it doesn't look like other people at my age and stage doesn't mean it doesn't have as much validity and concern and need to process. So that's a lot of it is just like carving and taking and holding something that is mine.
Yeah, wow.
And
I
dance, and a lot of dance.
A lot of dance.
Yeah.
Whoa. Um, yeah, I've also been surprised at the work that I'm doing right now with boundary
Mm.
at this stage of life. And I don't know why I should be that surprised. It's not like I learned that as a child, you know, I kind of had the opposite experience. So, you know, throughout life, learning different stages, different levels of embodiment of boundary, what that even means, that it's okay to have one. And I think a regulated nervous system, what I'm hearing you say is like, is is having boundary, boundary to have space for yourself, something that you've created that, you know, there is a time and a place for the interactions, for the relationships, for the giving and receiving, for being in the friendships and in the client dynamics. But, first and foremost, perhaps what is needed is to have that time and space for ourselves. And in that, we often have to have a boundary because if we don't, others will immediately, not consciously, but want to take that space.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I know for myself, I'm really working this and having to understand, what is mine? What am I even worthy of having this space, that that's necessary for myself, and that it's okay to say no, and that I don't have to explain myself, and all of these kind of patterns that I've been looking at that bring me back to such a very young state of being. You're talking about parts, right? These young parts that never learned that that was okay to take time and space for myself, right? So, how do I find that balance where I'm learning how to give and to receive from that place of it's okay to take this for myself and still be of service and still give, and having learned, in that process of learning, having given way too much of myself at certain periods of my life, and then having had to withdraw and really, find that center of gravity again. Um, there's something quite profound, and I'm in the middle of a new level of that and understanding that. Even as we're talking, I'm just blown away by, wow, that's, even feeling the embodied kind of expansion of new boundary.
And I think the key to anybody that's starting to have or deepen a conversation of regulation and nervous system, you said it best when you said, like, I've got to get dysregulated in order to get regulated. It doesn't mean to hold a pristine system. It doesn't mean to hold a pristine boundary. We've got to lose it to find it. We've got to dismantle it altogether. And I think that's part of the play of starting to have these conversations with less seriousness and less risk, is to say, okay, let me see what it feels like to say no without explanation and just sit
Mhm.
there. And if I say no to you without explaining myself, I'm going to dysregulate. And so if I'm trying to hold to a regulated system, that's going to put me in a lot of patterns that might not be at the edge of what I want. And so I guess it's to also say a regulated system isn't the point. It's just a place we pass through.
Uh-huh.
And then to notice when we get dysregulated, all we're losing is choice. I just don't have choice as to how I want to show up for you. I don't have choice as to how I want to lower my voice or soften my eyes. But I need to lose choice in order to find it. I need to lose my boundaries in order to get them. And so what I hear you say in the forever reconstruction is just notice that, like, we're always new, sort of, especially when you have hormonal changes. It's new.
Isn't it incredible that we can be new even if our bodies are not as new? And I'm really noticing that my body is not as new as that
Yes.
it used to be. And that's a change too. I'm just like really being with that right now. And that can feel so painful at times. And then I have to laugh. I'm like, why is this so painful? It's not like you didn't know you were going to be in your 40s, Ciela, you know? And it's like, yeah, but I didn't know it was going to feel like this in my body, or I didn't know I was going to like wake up to that wrinkle, or I didn't know I was going to have to deal with that mood or whatever it is. And yeah, so this is kind of a new territory of change that I'm really presencing and yeah, getting curious about. And at the same time, there is this freshness, there's this newness. There's like like I feel like a newborn baby, I feel like 3 years old, or I feel that I'm coming into this new rite of passage. It's
Hmm.
completely simultaneous, this juxtaposition of being, which has nothing to do with age.
Hmm.
But,
Did you feel
yeah.
that before the vision quest, or did coming out of the quest
Oh,
really feel like a rebirth?
Feeling, well, let's say, coming out of the quest, or maybe I should say, going into the quest felt like a dissolve. And, neither of us are new to the dissolve and the process of dissolving and then the reconstruction and the becoming and, this death, rebirth, transformation process that, as an inner explorer, as a transformer, as a human being that, practices embodiment, we're constantly in that. But so I knew I was heading into a dissolve. I went into the dissolve. It was much more extensive, much more liquid than I have experienced before because of the intentionality, because the high the high riskness of this, the the level of forge that this quest was and is, the invitation that I provided really for myself to do that work required me to go into a canyon on a mountain side in Mexico in the middle of nowhere, for this amount of time, not eating or drinking that much water, and really putting myself in a situation where I had no other place to go but to dissolve. And then on the seventh day, I had my vision, right? There was visions all throughout, but on the seventh day, I received a vision, and that vision was multidimensional, kind of like a Rubik's cube of context and riddles and an exploration of answers to questions I didn't even know that I had. And inside of that was a beginning again, but that beginning was a seed, an egg, something that wasn't quite ready to be born yet. It was just uh, a knowing and a receiving of that. And so in that, there's a momentum. It's slow, and there's a kind of a anticipation or a curiosity of like, okay, well, this seed or this egg eventually opens, eventually is born, eventually sprouts. And then there's, kind of the lead into a future vision, but then an immediate bringing back to the present moment. And so that was very much occurring in the midst of those days. Yeah, I would say I'm definitely not reborn yet, but I'm much more formed than I was then. Yeah.
Can you even orient to some of the things that were hard for you going into it, or did it really metabolize some of those difficult questions out?
Yeah, I mean, I am insatiable of, as a student of the inner planes and inner world, as you are. And I love a great challenge. And it was so humbling in the best way, right? Of really, really getting a new realm of objectivity, gaining that objectivity to be able to see myself, to be able to see my behavioral patterns, to see my gestalt, to see my feelings and the weaving of between my thoughts and my feelings and my fears and my traumas, and to witness myself in my mechanical states, right? And just this mechanism of default reactivity, and to see that in so many different facets, so many different realms, so many different relationships, so many different circumstances, right? And to begin to kind of pull myself out of that identification and witness myself throughout all these different spheres of my life and gain some freedom from that, right? Like to be able to see it, but not just see it. Seeing it is not enough, as we know. It's like we can't go into a ceremony and see our future and then wow, this is what's happening. And then I don't have to do anything because now I'm enlightened. I mean, that's what is, unfortunately happens so much, but seeing is not enough. It's like, okay, we're given the opportunity to see, but then what are you going to do with it? How are you going to, how are you going to work with that? Right? And that's part of the learning, part of the unlearning for me. And that was a tremendous gift and really ugly. I mean, I saw parts of myself like, you know, whoa, just incredibly difficult and guttural in having to move through guilt and shame and disgust and judgment, criticism, um, of myself, self-hatred, honestly, tapping into new realms of self-hatred in order to get through to what is that self-hatred covering? What is it, you know, disguising? What's inside of that that is true, that is real? Um, and so, yeah, I think it was a like it kind of upped the ante in my everyday process because I'm always working in that realm, but not to the extent of which we can or that I can when I'm in a container such as that, right? Which is, I think, is why I've always gone into retreat or meditation retreats or um, on these kinds of solo ventures that I could have moments to decompose in peace, in peace, in quotes. Um, I'm curious, Ali, tell me about like your process. Like, where do you go? Do you need to go on retreat also? Is this something that you do frequently for yourself, or do you just embody it in your everyday? Is it both? Like, how do you find those spaces for
I,
yourself?
it's varied throughout. I think I'm in my 24th, fifth year practice, probably like similar timeline of you. And I can look back at those early stages that were constant in and out of ashram and temple and sweat lodge and retreat. And I spent, you know, the last 20 years of my career in group work, granted leading it, but it was a lot of just that immersive space. And probably once a year now, I'll go be in silence or in deep inquiry or with a teacher I really value. But I guess when I hear you speak of, what you uncovered in Vision Quest and what many people know is the peril of big insight work is probably what, the Buddhas would say, chop wood, carry water, of like, yeah, of course it's the mundanality, you do your laundry, but no, like the chop wood, carry water to me is like, no, watch that thought, readjust that pattern, call that person, no, go towards conscious conflict. Like it's the everyday living out habitual things in somewhat of a more choice filled way that I don't rely so much on retreat anymore to decompose because I'm really attempting to just like be in a life,
Hmm.
not have to go out of a life to find something.
Hmm.
So I think they're so beautiful if you can have the time and the energy and the space to afford them. They're so beautiful to be able to step out of role and habit and just like the normal things the psyche gets settled into to deeply see from a new way. And then I can see the places in lives like mine, maybe you can relate, where I don't need any more insight. I need like action on the insight gifted. And
Hmm.
so I think what ceremony space does so well in any lineage is it is just so generous, whether somebody calls it a download or a vision, like it's so generous. And then I think the honor to the generosity is to then take the insight and put it really deeply into relationships and into action and into form. And so I guess some of the not leaving day-to-day life as much is to kind of honor the insight. And I have this thing that I probably have to like be more explicit about is I always believe what I need is somewhere other than where I am. I've got 9 planets in Sag and there's a wind that runs through me with a fire that backs it that always believes something else somewhere else has what I need. And so
Hmm.
that's also the more honest conversation of, and I got to just know that wherever I am reprograms the part of me that's like in another thing and another thing, because they're so helpful and they let me step out of role and condition. So long answer, short question, maybe like once a year now, but I think more importantly is just real deep dips into the wild and into nature. And that's probably like where I put more time and energy now.
With that movement, that fire, that sense of adventure, the willing to take the risk, the enthusiasm, um, carried on the wind, that's air, that's fire, right? Astrologically, and I haven't really been talking about astrology in these podcasts in this particular series because it's really about living the astrology. How are each of us living in this moment of change? Because we recently went from some major planetary bodies that were embedded in the earth or steeped in the waters, right? Embedded in earth signs, steeped in waters, have now or and are transitioning into fire signs, into air signs. So we could say, Ali, like, this is your time. Like, you are now being reflected in this current moment of, wow, this change is radical, it's fiery, it's passionate, and it's swift, and it's, so um I find that
Mm.
really intriguing, um because when those outer planetary bodies and those kind of internal, or social bodies, let's say Saturn and Jupiter, for example, um, Saturn just moved from Pisces into Aries. So Saturn in Pisces is going to be, Saturn is Lord of Karma, Saturn is Lord of Time, moving through water. It's a bit more fluid. We're in a flow. When it moves into Aries, it ignites, right? And now it's on. And whatever the karma is of this moment, whatever the discipline that is required to meet this moment, is going to come in a very fiery way. Um, so all of that to say, I think this moment of, for each one of us is, moving with that, the fire and the wind. And so no matter what our constitution is, we are navigating new elements. It just so happens to be those are elements that you're very familiar with. I'm wondering what the antidote has been for you. I'm imagining, and I know, like water, healing waters as an antidote to all of the movement, the fire, the air, right? Like steeping, like earth, like you were saying, nature. So just for all of us listening today, when, I think that's just a good reminder that in these times when there's a lot of heat and there's a lot of movement and it's unpredictable because Pluto is an Aquarius and we have a very Uranian, leader right now in the country that we're living in, right? That's unpredictable and totally rebellious of status quo, and there's change in every direction, and it doesn't matter if we like it or not. It's what's happening. Um, that, yeah, coming back to earth, coming back to those healing waters could be really, really a wonderful thing.
I think mandatory, and stay as close to things that are old and life-giving as possible. So that to me is just like good water, good soil, good surroundings, stillness. And then as earth-based of a spirituality as one could have, I think to just like keep pulling the God realm down into the human earth realm of just knowing that it is so unbelievable, some of the things that we are living through and playing out and complicit to, and to like remember the scope of time, to remember things that are really life fulfilling, and to also know that like there is some kind of elegant order. We can't understand it or see it, but there is an elegant order amidst it all too. I think those are really helpful things for my, all of it right now too.
Ali, I know that surrender is a big word and is also a practice
Yeah.
that we're in constantly. And we've talked about it, we've explored it together. Um, Here's one. Okay, AI,
Yeah.
right? AI in relationship to embodiment. Like, how is AI uh, impacting our embodiment as human beings? And where is the surrender in relationship with AI? And where is also the boundary?
Hmm. Yeah, these are fun questions and important questions and big questions because AI is like at the beginning of the internet saying, what is our relationship to surrender to the internet and embodiment to the internet? It was the same, when people were having the crypto conversation of it being the currency for the dark web. Like all of these things are tools, and the choice we have is to the degree that we engage with them. And so I think the moment we have othered AI, there's this really amazing, like, remember, you and I might have talked about it. James Lovelock wrote the Gaia hypothesis, the Gaia theory. So he was that kind of seminal voice as a scientist in changing the way climate sciences were looked at in the 70s and 80s, of saying, we have this one system, whatever pollution happens somewhere, it affects somewhere else. So he kind of changed climate sciences by looking at Earth as one organism, one being. He wrote his last book at, I think, like 104 years old or something, called Novacene. And he said, like, we're a carbon-based being, but AI, that's a silica-based being. It's still of Earth. So it's still here. It has a natural element to it. We've lived in New York City. The building is so removed from nature, but it's built of sand and stone and water. Like, it is built of the same blocks of mineral and consciousness that is anything else. And so I think it's to the degree that we use it, feel empowered to be allies to it. I think we can't understand what it is, truly. I don't think we can understand what has been created, because there's genies out of the bottle and there's so many iterations to come. But I think at this nascent stage of how AI is touching a lot of facets of each of our lives, implicitly and explicitly, the dominant conversation we have now and with our kids and with each other is, how do we want to engage with it at the expense of, our real life conversations, our real life relationships, our real life therapists, our real life synagogues, mosques, temples, because I can see the biggest threat to our embodiment is not the way we zone into a screen, it's the way we zone into an isolated conversation with a imagined one, and a one that's easier to project upon. And I think the hardest thing in our embodiment, I see it with my friends using it for therapy and for writing partners, is and intimate relationship, is that it feeds us back the kind of light and shadow that feels good to us. I can let it talk to me in a certain way. I can ask it to be more avoidant with me. I can ask it to speak to me with more praise. And so then my psyche doesn't have the kind of real world social reflection that true embodiment asks of us. So that to me would be less about how we engage with tech and more about how we stay close to each other and don't create these echo chambers of what our psyche wants to hear and how our psyche wants to be spoken to. Because I can see that as a real complication. And who knows? Who knows what's about to occur, because we are already in something I never would have even imagined. I wouldn't have even imagined a year ago we would be, I was just at a conference and watching the robot on stage, and then watching some of the developments coming up, and watching some of the large language models mapping animal language, and watching some of the flying like, it's undeniably magical, and whatever is the other word,
Bizarre,
alarming.
bizarre, alarming,
Yeah.
fantastical, real.
Yeah.
It's really happening.
Yeah. Real. It's really, really real.
I mean, something that you just said, I just have to uh, clarify for myself, but I know it's what you're saying. It's like, you know, we're designing our our friend, quote unquote, our AI reflector, this imagined one, and we're asking it to be more avoidant to me. And then so it's like we're training ourself using this mechanism. And where are we training ourselves to go?
Great question. Great question. I think great question. Maybe like to rut into some similar grooves as we've already known, and I think that happens when people are using them as thought partners or creative partners or I think it's amazing. Your therapist isn't available at 3 a.m., but when you go to it for a certain level of pushback and you can train it how you want to be spoken to, that's amazing, but it doesn't solve for the imperfection of relationships and the imperfection of each other that just has to exist in order for us to see our own psyches. And the one other answer to what you were saying about embodiment, I noticed with myself what I want to keep my hands on the reins of is the first stumbling block my mind hits in terms of, like, how could I say this better? Or what's the right grammar here? Or what's the word I'm looking for? Or how's this sentence structure going to go? The first stumbling block my mind has to go and use some rigor and problem solving on, I can see it's reaching for just let that do it. And so I think adding some kind of rigor and discipline to what I was saying this the other day, I'll notice like I just had a little curb to get on, just like a little step up in my mind. But then I'm on the escalator when I'm like, hold on, I just meant to take one step up. And now I'm like very deep inside of getting a lot of help and a lot of information. I just had one problem to solve. And so I think I have to, in my embodiment, use it as responsibly as I can to keep some of my resources protected, like
Yes.
discernible thought and fact checking and solve that problem and hunt for the word yourself,
Capacity.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, maybe surrendering to what is, but not surrendering our capacity.
Mm-hmm. That never, can't, won't, shouldn't.
Please, no.
I saw this amazing quote of somebody that say, I wanted AI to do my laundry and my tasks so I could do my writing and my art. And now AI is doing my writing and my art, so I have more time to do laundry and tasks. And so it's like, use it in the way that, expands what we want to expand. And all of this could be a really moot conversation within 1 week.
Absolutely. I was going to say, this is part 2. Let's come
Yeah.
back in a little while
Yeah.
and see where we're at. Ali, is there anything you want to share about what you're up to right now, or how can people find out more about you?
Everything I do is just on myname.com, alibogard.com. And no, like there's so much content. There's so much free content. There's lots of long form free audio. And then anything I can do is found there. A lot of what I'm working with are like more closed containers of intimate groups of people where we're just in kind of long conversations over a period of time. We live a lot of life together in name of the practice. So if it's a conversation somebody wants to be in, they can just reach out to me from that.
Or they could read your book. Can you give us a little, just a glimpse into what The Quiet Teachers is about?
Yeah, The Quiet Teachers it's broken into 4 sections of really learning how to communicate with the intelligence of everything that's trying to talk to us. So the little trigger, that thought, that uncomfortable sensation, that pattern, how to feel it and how to perceive it and ask good questions about it, how to take action on it. So it's kind of a 4-step process of taking anything that's arising in life and building a relationship to it, not a reaction to it, not a resistance to it, but just how do I relate to it? How do I create an intimacy in my life with what happens? Because I believe that everything in life is in a conversation with us. And even even the things we would consider not sentient, we're in a relationship with them, and how we believe onto them and perceive them and react to them. And so it's a book about just being in relationality and intimacy to life.
Thank Thank you for that, Ali. Thank you for the legacy that is unfolding inside of you of being and your explorations and your reminders. And uh, again, for just being such a good friend and for being here today and taking this time. Um, One last question. Is there anything else that you would like us to know? Anything you want to leave us with today?
No, I think I would just say that I can imagine anybody that's tuned into your frequency and anybody that would even stick around to this part of the conversation is in it in a very deep way, in a meaningful way, you know, and watching both the beauty and the terror of a human life and like the perplexity of having a life that might have so much peace to it while so much of the world is in the opposite of that. So I would just say to whoever's made it this far and tuned into your channel that I know we're with you, and all of these conversations are beautiful and amazing and frivolous, to just knowing that like we're all doing our best, and wherever somebody listens to this, I trust they're doing their best, and that's about it, and just keep going. I trust you're doing your best, keep going. And that's probably all I got.
Thanks, Ali. I love
Yeah,
you.
I love you. Thanks for the conversation, sister. Thank you for being such a good friend. Such a good conversation.
Mm, Thanks for being here, Ali.
Yeah.
All right. We're signing off now.
Okay, good.